And again, there are new functions in Microsoft Excel. These functions are the PivotBy and GroupBy functions. Basically, they help us group and aggregate data just like the traditional pivot table, but they actually possess certain advantages over the traditional pivot table, making some individuals believe that these functions will most likely replace the traditional pivot table with time. Well, that might be true, but I do not belong to that school of thought, and this is simply because functions can be quite complicated sometimes, leaving the person using them quite confused. In this video, I'll be showing us how we can utilize the pivot by and group by functions, and also show us how these functions can be advantageous over the traditional pivot table. I simply want to get the total profits for each country within this data range. The function I'll be using is the group by function. How do I do this? I'll quickly just equal to, then group by, double tap this, and good. Now you can see the parameters I have. The first parameter here is the row fields. This is basically my categories, and in this situation the country column will be my row fields. This is quite similar to row you have in a traditional pivot table field list. So I use Control Shift then down arrow to highlight this entire column, then Control backspace to go back to the very top. Now I put a comma, and the next parameter is values. Like I said, I want to get the total profit for each country within this data range, so my values automatically becomes my profit. So I select this cell. If you observe, I'm always selecting starting from the header. Make sure you do the same. I put a comma, then the next parameter is the function. This is basically what function I want to use to aggregate this data. So you can see we have a variety of functions, but in this situation, I'll be using the sum. This parameter is actually quite similar to the summarized value by you have in a traditional pivot table setup. So I'll select sum, then a comma. The next parameter is the field headers. So this option basically helps you insert your header or not. You can either tell it you do not want a header. You can either tell it you have a header but do not want to show it. You can either tell it to generate one for you if at all you do not have. Then you can either tell it you have one and you want it to show. It all depends. In this situation, I have a header and I want it to show. So I select number 3, then I put a comma. Now the next parameter is the total depth. For total depth, do you want to see your grand totals and subtotals, or do you not want to see your grand totals and subtotals? So you can see the variety of options you have. In this situation, I simply just want to see my grand totals. So I put number 1, then I enter. You can see how the group by function has successfully helped me aggregate my result. Now I'll use a traditional pivot table to achieve this same goal. How do I do this? I quickly just select any cell within the data range, then I come to insert, then I select a pivot table, then from table slash range. Now you can see this quickly just highlights the entire data range here. Now I want this to be in the existing worksheet, so I select this, then for the location, select any cell here, then I enter, and this is good. You can see my field list at the extreme right. I quickly drag country to rows, then drag profit to values, and this is what we have. You can see I've successfully achieved the same thing using the traditional pivot table. Another thing I can do is to sort my data using the group by function. How do I do this? Quickly just come to this cell, then I come to the last parameter I entered, then insert a comma. Now if you observe, you can see the next parameter here is called sort order. Now assuming I have more than 4 columns within this aggregation, I can sort using whichever of those columns. Now I personally want to sort this data using the second column, that is the profits. So I just put number 2, telling it sort this data based off the profits column. Then I enter. On doing this, you can see some sort of ascending order sorting has been done, because this is clearly the smallest down to the largest. If I want to reverse this, that is to make it in descending order, I just select this cell, then come to the last parameter, that is sort order, and insert a negative sign in front of the value there. Then I enter, and you can see the sorting has been reversed. Now I quickly just Control Z. So the way that the group by function is advantageous over the traditional pivot table is I do not need to refresh when I make an update in the data range. Now observe what happens here. I just edit the profits for Kenya in Aquarius, and now as you can see, the aggregation made by the group by function automatically updates itself, but that was not the same for the group by for the pivot table. I'll definitely have to refresh for the pivot table in order for that to reflect, as you can see here. The next thing I want to achieve is I want to get the total profits for each country by the products. How do I do this? I'll simply be utilizing the pivot by function for this. So I quickly just type out equal pivot by. Good. Now you should have something like this. And you should know that how the pivot by differs from the group by function is simply because the pivot by makes consideration for a column category. As you can see here, we have what we call the column fields. Now you can see the first one here is the row fields, and we know that the row fields should be the country column. So I highlight this column, then I do this. Good. For the column fields will be my products because I want this products to actually form the columns in my aggregated data. Then for the values, the profit is my values. For the function, sum should be the function here. Then for the field headers, I have field headers and I want them to show. So this is 3. Then for the row total depth, I want just the grand totals. So I put number 1, then I enter. And you should have something like this. So you can see I have my total profits for each country by the individual products. Whatever you can see on my screen, I can actually achieve with a traditional pivot table. So I quickly just do that. I select any cell within the data range. I go to insert, then I come to pivot table from table/range. Now it quickly highlights the entire range for you. Then I select existing worksheet. For the location, I'll just select this cell, then I enter. Good. So in this situation, I drag country to rows, then drag product to columns, then profit to values, and you should have something like this. So yeah, now I quickly just come to this row for Egypt, then I make an edit to the profit made, and you observe that the aggregation made by the pivot by function automatically updates itself, but that is not the same for the pivot table. For the pivot table, I'll have to come to data and refresh all before the change reflects. It's always up to you to decide whatever you want to use to group and aggregate your data. But all that matters is, are you being productive and efficient at that particular point in time? This is just what we have for today, and I'm sure you all learned how to use the group by and pivot by function. If you have questions, kindly ask in the comment section below, and I'll try as much as possible to answer your questions in the best way I can. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you.